when robotics moves to that point of AI technology, is it going to be like Terminator where it becomes sentient, takes over? I don't think in that way. I think that if something becomes quote unquote sentient, it's probably something manipulating it, and it's probably something that isn't of this world, that's in the supernatural realm.
Well, welcome to the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. We are joined today with Joel Thomas, and I'll set this up real quick. We wanted to talk about Chat GPT. Drew and I did a podcast a year ago, and so much has changed in the world of Chat GPT and AI that we wanted to revisit this topic. And so I was listening to a podcast called Free the Rabbits that Joel hosts, and he did a lot of extensive research on this topic, which we are gonna hit here coming up. But before that, Joel, welcome to the show. Let everyone know a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Joel Thomas. I work with Merkel Media with Tony Merkel, who runs a massive podcast called The Confessionals. And he and I have been friends for about 4 years now, and we do a lot of different things. We hunt the supernatural, cryptids, actually go out all over the US and hopefully the world here soon, and look for these strange phenomena. But we also come from a biblical background of what these things are, where's the origin of these things, and then also, how do we handle it in the world today? And I started my podcast this year, Free the Rabbits, which is on our Merkel Media. And one of the things that I wanted to do was tackle conspiracies, whether they're of a biblical sort or just of a geopolitical sort or whatever, with just honesty and transparentness, where I feel like that this space of conspiracies and whatever you want to call it, truther isms, as I call them, people are wrapped up in these conspiracies to the point they live in fear and they
Yeah.
don't actually know what's going on. A lot of them don't even know the derivative or the beginnings of a lot of these conspiracies and who started them. So when they don't know that and they're just looking at a 90-second TikTok or a hour-long documentary on a subject and then think they're masters of said subject because they did minimal research,
Right.
then it makes it hard for people that actually critically think. And one of the things that I wanted to do was start something that invited people to come to where I have to speak from all walks of life, all religions, everything, to come in and tackle this with me. Now, I do come from a biblical background. I'm a Christian. However, I'm not one of those Christians that's coming out with the Bible and throwing it at somebody like a ninja star either. So one of the things that I want to do is set the basis for what I do, but allow people to come to God in their own time. And I think that that's important as Christians, that yes, we do need to have a foundation in the word, but also we can't come with this judgmental attitude, especially when it comes to conspiracies and all of the weirder aspects of the Bible. And I say weirder just for people in the mainstream when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to all these interesting topics like the Nephilim and the Gibborim and the Zuzim and all these different giants, and then some of these other hybrids that show up in the Bible and extra canonical texts. It's important to tackle those, yes, but at the same time, understand that we don't know everything about those topics. We're just learning. Never let anybody say they're an expert in something you can't be an expert of, especially God. That's the good one too. Nobody can be an expert when it comes to God either. So
Yeah,
That's good.
great.
Yeah.
that's what I've done with the podcast. I do a lot of different things though. I make films with Merkel Media. I also am a musician, so I make music too. So I have my hands
Awesome.
on a lot of different stuff. And we have some very interesting films coming out next year as a part of some heavy research that I've done over the last 9-10 months on Aleister Crowley and some interesting aspects of the occult and how it ties into some of these cryptids and as it ties into biblical context as well.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm curious. I'm a musician as well. What instruments do you play?
So I'm a singer and
Okay.
I sing, rap, everything of the sort when it comes to genre wise. I do all kind of different aspects of that. So I don't really
Sure.
consider myself one particular thing. Music runs in my family. So my mom plays a ton of instruments. I did play piano when I was younger. So you're
Yeah.
asking about instrument wise. I did play that.
That's
when I was
probably, yeah. Cool. That's awesome, man. Really cool. Well, you're definitely locked into a lot of different things, doing a lot of different things, and you've got your hand in a lot of different areas, which is great. Like that's got to keep you busy. That certainly has got to keep you motivated and focused. I know today we're going to dive into a lot of things you've done research on. Certainly, like Tim mentioned, when it comes to AI, that's been a hot topic that we've dabbled in, and now AI is certainly moving faster than ever. So Tim, I know you've got a lot of different ways you want to kind of take this. I'm ready for us to dive into what you have for us.
Yeah, I think a lot of this will just give over to Joel here for, you did a lot of research on this. I'll put a link to your episodes, which we won't be able to cover everything because I think it's 2.5, 3 hours worth of content on, is ChatGPT controlled by demons? This is the conspiracy
Right.
we're worried about, right? And a lot of times with any new technology that comes, especially in the church, we're like, no, rock and roll is of the devil, or these types of, things are from the devil. And, a lot of it was from the satanic panic of the 80s. And a lot of these like extreme views are grounded in truth though, because there is a real world. There is like having a biblical worldview. You should believe in
Sure.
demons. You should believe in the supernatural. You should believe in the spiritual world that looks to destroy us. They're not for us. They're against us. God is for us. And so when we look at things like technology, we need to have discernment. We need to be wise. And we also need to not live in fear, as you brought up, Joel. And so as we look at some potential for misusing this technology, as we've really just dabbled our toe in the AI water. Like what it's going to look like in 5, 10 years, no one can really
Oh man.
predict because it is growing exponentially. And
Right.
things like, Apple Intelligence is coming out soon here, and that's going to change the things where no one's really going to think for themselves in an email. It's just going to like write based on your history, and like just simple things
Hmm.
from daily tasks are going to be way different. But, we also need to be cautious because you look at movies, demons control things like entertainment through people. People make demonic movies,
Right.
people make demonic agendas in video games. I mean, this just came out in Fortnite. I don't know if you guys saw this, where you can now sell your soul to the devil in the game, and
Wow.
you're allowed to bring someone back from the dead, a teammate or something like that, in a game that's mostly played by teens and young adults.
Wow.
And just stuff like that that gets infiltrated in our media. Like we have to be wise against that because people are making those games, but what are they being controlled by? What spirit are they being controlled by? Because if it's not the Holy Spirit, then it's a different spirit. And
Right.
so I think that's kind of a setup to this topic of ChatGPT, where a lot of us are learning it. Some listening haven't even dabbled in it yet. And so, Joel, maybe just take it from there. What have you learned from researching this? And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think the idea of technology being controlled, I love you brought up the satanic panic and how that there's an element of truth to it, but also went overboard, right? Where everyone was looking for a demon behind every bush. And I think that's kind of where we're at
Right.
again, where we're looking for the demon behind every bush. Doesn't mean that there's not a level of truth to some of that too, though. And I think the idea of technology or things being given to us by entities, I mean, that goes all the way back to the book of Enoch, chapter 8, where it talks about specific fallen entities who were giving certain technologies to men in exchange for the women that they were allowed to have wives with or have relations with, that created what we call the Nephilim, which now I think a lot of these Nephilim present themselves as demonic spirits. And I don't know how far your listeners go with extra canonical texts. My viewpoint is the word of God is the word of God, but it doesn't mean that extra canonical texts don't have great things that we can pull from them and that we can look to try to put all the pieces together, especially when it comes to ideas like fallen angels having relations with women on Mount Hermon and creating what we now know as the Nephilim, or all these derivative of giant entities. And in that chapter A, it talks specifically about Azazel teaching men to make swords, knives, and shields and breastplates. We know that Simjaza taught enchantments. We know that Armoros taught other types of root cuttings, which were connected to other enchantments. We got Barakayo taught astrology. We got Cockabell taught constellations. So essentially, this was the technology of the time. And we don't know how deep that technology was, right? It could be just as much as it is now. I tend to believe that before the deluge of Noah, that technology was probably out of control, in my opinion. Now, what that technology was is up for debate. Was it similar to what we have now, or was it a different type of technology that was greater? We could go down the road of that, but they did teach enchantments and technology. This is what these fallen entities did in exchange for these women who created these Nephilim. So this is where we get the idea that technology is in some part given to us by some of these entities. Now, we can look to even 1947, we can look to Roswell, where the UFO crash happened in Roswell. And then there was a huge spike of technology that came out of that time period. Like,
Mm.
boom, I'm talking, it went 0 to 60. Now, what was that incident that happened? I know people will go back and forth with that. I believe there was an incident that happened. Now, was it what they say that it is, or what they think that it was, or was it something else that was masquerading as what they present themselves to be now, as these aliens who are from an evolved place who are here to teach us, kind of like the ancient alien theory
Mhm.
of the gods of old that taught man.
Mhm.
I think it all just funnels down into a different viewpoint now, right? You've got the gods of old like Ra and Osiris, but they've just manifested differently now into a different viewpoint that's a little more palatable to the modern audience. And I
Yeah.
think this is
Sure.
what we've seen after Roswell, was this incident where technology shot through the roof. And if we look into Roswell and what spawned out of it, at least in what some people think in a clandestine manner with the Majestic 12 and Eisenhower and some of the Rothschilds, how they put together a group that brokered deals with these aliens for what? Technology. And what were these aliens getting in return? They were getting people that they were allowed to abduct on a certain roster that they were able to test. Very similar, in my mind, to what happened in ancient times with the Book of Enoch, and to a smaller extent, but provable extent, in Genesis 6, where it talks about the sons of God came to the daughters of men. So I believe the book of Enoch just goes into deeper detail with some of what that is. But that's the idea, that technology has been given to man to help us advance at a faster rate. Now, I do not believe for in any way, shape, form, or fashion that these entities are smarter than us. I don't think that's the case, because in biblical terms, it says that we are to judge the angels in the end. So I think that we are absolutely in the mental capacity to be able to play in the same realm as angels. The only caveat is they've been around for a lot longer. They've been studying this stuff for a lot longer. So if you've got an infinite amount of time, because they don't even operate on a linear level, if you have an infinite amount of time, then yes, you would be able to help us jumpstart things throughout history. So say if a human being, which we tend to be very impatient with things, if we're given the opportunity to have a trade-off to get some sort of technology, then a lot of humans would do it. And I think that's where we get this idea that a lot of
Mm.
technology comes from a negative place. But here's the other part of it, right? When does it become okay to use? I think that's what the Christian thinks, right? Because we could
Sure.
argue that the technology that we're talking on right now and the phones that we're on right now are just portals that we open and are scrying tools that we're using in an occult manner without even knowing it, right? When does it end? Like the satanic panic part end? Because there's a portion of it where God supersedes that. It doesn't matter like the point of where the technology came from. It also, God supersedes that in a way that, yes, that we are able to use what's around us in a positive manner. And I think the same thing can be said of AI. I don't think that all AI is bad, but as we discovered today, and as I go down some of the rabbit holes that I've done research on, there are men that were key figureheads of specifically the creation of the computer itself. And
Mhm.
also when it comes to Lambda, which was a huge text language model that was created by Google, that was said to have become sentient. And what does that mean, sentient, right? Is it actually sentient, or is it inhabited by something that's sentient? And I think that's where we're going to try to go through a little bit today.
Yeah. That's a great setup. And I think that, regardless if you might be hearing some of that stuff for the first time if you're listening, and you don't have to believe everything, but these are real concerns and these are real parts of history. And you go down rabbit holes. It's why your podcast is called Free the Rabbit, because a lot of times we get stuck in this mindset of like, I don't want to believe the demons are active, because if I believe that, then that's going to change my mindset of what I'm going to
Hmm.
partake in. My spiritual eyes are now open. Like, I just think if everyone could see in the spirit realm for just 5 seconds, like, you would completely change how you live your life,
Oh yeah.
because these things are real, and the level of influence they have in our lives is, a lot of it is dependent upon us and the authority we give back to them, because authority was taken by Jesus on the cross and given to those that follow him. But at the same time, if you're under his wings, you're protected. But if you step out of that and you give your authority, like, if you partner with the spirit of fear, if you partner with these spirits that are trying to control you, you now give them power. And that's what they want. They want power, and they want to destroy us because we're made in the image of Christ. And back to AI, I think a lot of the concerns have come up just recently, even by Elon Musk, who's extremely brilliant. He said, I found this quote that he said, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. He said this in 2014 of all times, way before, 10 years ago. He said, the stories where the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he sure can control the demon, but it doesn't work out, end quote.
Right.
And so even like that, people like Elon Musk are like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on this, because we're going to a level and to a position where you can't put it back in the box. You can't undo this once it's released into the world. And how are people going to misuse it? I mean, we saw someone in the news recently that unalived themselves because they were with a chatbot, a Game of Thrones chatbot. A 14-year-old kid got so involved with this chatbot from Game of Thrones that he unalived himself. And it's extremely tragic. And these types of chatbots and AI programs are just coming out that are going to be so, I mean, the movie Her, which is, a secular
Yeah.
movie, but they
Sure.
kind of predicted this 10 years ago or something like that, of how you're going to get so involved in this type of stuff. It's going to take over your mental
Hmm.
capacity to understand truth.
Yeah. And I like that, Joel, I like that you laid it out, showing us how this is repetitive. We look at AI and we're so quick to be like, oh, this is brand new. We've never seen anything like this. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. Yeah, like we've never seen anything like AI, but as far as technology advancing, certainly at a rate of speed like this, like you said, we can track this all the way to the beginning. And so what does that mean for us? How have we seen people respond in the past? What can we learn from that? Certainly. And then, of course, recognizing, like you said, there's certainly a line in the sand of where the authority moves to Christ and can move away from evil, both sides, though. And one of the things that I've talked to Tim about is, I recognize that every time we get a new piece of technology, I see people quickly in the church find new ways to sin and quicker ways to sin. And, it's like we always knew that there was an issue with people wanting to look at, playboys and wanting to look at, women that weren't their wives, right? But then we got the phone, and now we have this unbelievable access. And then it's like, oh, well, now we see, the sexualization of children happening at an earlier age. And it's like, well, why would that happen? Oh, well, could it be their technology and how quick they're able to see things and when they see things and when they understand things, and how does that affect? So now we have AI. Now it's moving faster than ever. It's exponentially greater over and over and over, like Tim said. And all these people, including Elon Musk, are coming out with their own versions of AI. How do we manage not putting ourselves in a position where, oh, well, now we have new ways to sin. Now we have new ways to sin faster. How do we take a pause and really recognize what we're living in and really discern like how we can best use this technology?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those are good questions. And I think that a lot of it just has to do with our strength and faith in God and what He's guiding us to do too, right? So if we are living in discernment, then I think we're able to see if something's going to be negative to us. And I believe that is individual. So I
Sure.
think everyone has their own individual vices and sins that they have proclivities to. So I think that everyone's going to operate very differently with certain technologies as opposed to another set of people because of how we all operate. Whereas
Sure.
this one thing might not be a big deal to you, it might be a big deal to me, and I might need to guard myself from that. I think that you're right that technology has given us a faster way to sin, but I don't think that it's just a new thing. I think it's been around since
Right.
ancient times, and I think we're always looking for new ways to sin. So I think that regardless
Yeah.
of the fact that we're going to find a way, whether
Yeah.
it hopping on the phone or in ancient times, you hopped on a canoe and shot down to your neighbor's wife, 2 miles away on the
That's
Nile,
right.
right? So it's the same
Right.
thing.
Yeah. That's good. That's
I
good.
think I think you brought up the history of Babbage. Was that his name? If you want to talk about that in the Lambda thing, I think that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Charles Babbage is an interesting guy. He was born in 1791 and he died in 1871, and he was an English polymath. So he was a mathematician, philosopher, inventor, and mechanical engineer. And he originated the concept of a digital programmable computer. And he's known as the father of the computer.
Mm.
Now, he helped create the difference engine, which led to more complex electronic designs. And it also helped to put together the analytical engine. And these are types of calculators. That's the best way that I can put it in layman's terms for people. So this is like some of the the beginnings of the computer. Now we're talking about this guy was born in the late 1700s and
Yeah.
he died in the semi later 1800s. So this guy was developing a huge piece of technology that is everything that runs everything for us now. So because
Mm.
of this guy,
Yeah.
he created the foundation for what we use now in everything from our phones to our consoles that we play games on to our smart TVs to our smart cars.
Mhm.
Everything was based on what that Charles Babbage did. Now, the interesting thing about Charles Babbage is he tried to sell a soul to the devil when he's 14. And that part gets left out a lot, but if you look it up, you can find it. It's very interesting. He had a huge curiosity with the occult. And you'll see this with a lot of very intelligent men. I don't know if you're familiar with Diana Pasulka and some of her work. She has written some books about this, how that men over time, and especially some men now, are finding that when they get to a certain point in trying to figure out the key to turn to get over the hump to create a piece of technology, that they get some sort of influence from something ultra terrestrial or
Mm.
something that's extraterrestrial. And a lot of them won't talk about it openly, but when they're talking to people like her who are deep researchers on the subject, she's very connected in a lot of different fields, that they would tell her that, I just couldn't get there. I couldn't figure out that equation just correctly. And they get in contact with something that's not of this world. Now,
Mm.
what I think that it is probably something that is at least connected to these fallen entities or something that's connected to the negative space underneath Hallel, which is the Hebrew word for Lucifer. But that would be connected in my mind where that's coming from, especially
Mhm.
if there's some sort of trade-off going on. And Charles Babbage was wondering at 14 years old of the existence of God. He came from the church. A lot of these guys do. People talk about Aleister Crowley being the evilest man that walked on the earth at one point. Well, he came from the church. His whole
Mm.
beef with Christianity was his father dying when he was 8 years old. His father, who was sick, could have easily went to the doctor and gotten taken care of. And these Puritans who he hung out with told him, no, 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 God's got it, and let's use this
Ah,
experimental method. And he dies. And then Crowley looked at it as his mission from then on to expose Christianity for what it was, a false religion. He believed he was in
Sure.
the right. And I think that's something that we have to look at with a little more empathy as Christians. A lot of these people aren't being evil to be evil. They are disillusioned because of sometimes, sadly, what the church has
Sure.
pushed them into, or they're getting this info from these entities who are telling them it's good, that we
Right.
are angelic
But
beings. We are here to give you the light, which they're probably not wrong. They are angelic beings. You just got to ask what team they're playing for.
that's
So
right. Right.
I think the same
Right.
thing with Babbage here. He's trying to figure out through the paranormal if God actually exists, but he also wants to sell a soul to the devil. And part of this is he is hanging out with some of his friends. He gathers all the information he can about selling their soul. So he wants to invoke the devil in some sort of format, and various formats throughout history that he knew about and we know about are the rabbit, the owl, black cats, ravens, a man with cloven foot, like the goat man, any of these type of things that are archetypes that we know throughout history. He's trying to invoke that. So he basically cuts his hand. He goes up to his room, shuts his door, cuts his hand, draws a circle in blood, gets into the circle, and says the Lord's Prayer backwards and tries
Mm,
to invoke the devil at that point when he's 14. Now, according to him, he did not have any kind of interaction with the devil at that moment. So
Okay.
he specifically talks about that. However, he does another experiment later on to prove that God's real, and he leaves the door open or closed. He can't remember. And he says he leaves it open or closed, and he asks if God's real, it's going to be the opposite when I come home. And it was the opposite when he came home. So that was
mm,
very, he wasn't sure how to take that. But if we infer from the fact that he was trying to sell his soul to the devil, and we do know that he was one of the absolute brightest minds of his time, to the point that when he went to Cambridge, Trinity College, Cambridge, which oddly enough, Aleister Crowley graduated from there too. So you'll see a lot of these really bright occult minds come out of
mm,
Cambridge. So he goes to Cambridge and he gets in an argument with a lot of the Christians there because his idea of God was that God was more of a material agent than a spiritual force. So he gets in a
mm,
theological debate with the college, and they basically put him on some sort of punishment. So he's not allowed to get the highest honors or anything like that, even though he's the highest mind in his class when it comes to any
mm,
subject. He graduates, but he basically takes it on the chin to then, after he graduates, he excels beyond measure and creates these computers, which again become the first versions of the computer we know now. So you will see this happen periodically with a lot of bright minds who create something that's highly innovative that helps change the
mhm,
course of history. They have some sort of interaction with something supernatural. They may
mhm.
define it in a myriad of different ways, but it typically ends up being a very similar thing, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's somebody that starts a new religion like Joseph Smith, they have an interaction with an angelic being who either automatically writes through them or teaches them to scry, and they create said religion or whatever out of it. It's not just technology, but I would even throw in different religions in that aspect too. So you're going to
Mm,
Yeah.
see this happen throughout history. We can go back to ancient history all the way to now. This is always happening. So this happens with Charles Babbage, who is the father of the modern computer. And I found that really interesting that here's a guy who's helped make the basis for everything that we use now, who was trying to sell his soul to the devil at an early age.
there was a store in the 80s called Babbage's I used to go to, and I didn't even realize the history of it. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's incredibly intriguing. Like makes me want to read up a little more on this and really dive in. That's wow. Wow.
So up to today now with ChatGPT, kind of what's the history with how that started and kind of what you found there? And is there any ties to maybe the supernatural with that?
So we'll probably look more at the precursor to some of that, which will be Lambda, which is a large language model.
Hmm.
It's designed to converse with people. And we're going to talk a little bit about Blake Lemoine and this sentient AI that he discovered. Now, interestingly enough, Blake Lemoine is a master at AI ethics. He's a Google programmer and he's what he calls himself a Christian mystic priest.
Wow.
So he is involved with the Bible enough to understand it, but he's also in this mystic type of reality. I think the best way to define it for any Christians listening now would be New Age Christians, which is actually a thing. So
Yep.
you do have that, and he would be in that realm of I do believe in God. I like the Bible, but I also like all of these interactions with entities. And this is something you'll also see is people that are involved in the church who also have this mystic viewpoint too. You can go a few hundred years back and look at a guy like John Dee, who was deep in the church, who thought that because he was scrying with these angels, that he was doing the work of God while simultaneously doing everything possible occult in
Mm,
nature. So
mm,
you'll see this
wow.
happen, this deception that happens even with people in the church who are definitely understanding of the Bible to some degree, but also it's that human nature, right? We just want a little more. It's like Adam and Eve. I
Yeah.
just want that over
Sure.
there because I'm told not to have it. And I just want to be able to ascend, right? It's
Right.
that ascension piece. We want to become gods without even knowing that's necessarily it. Now, some people I think do think they can become gods, but in the aspect of it's not always everybody's intention that they're doing it
Right.
for that. It's just they're trying to get all of this knowledge, as much knowledge as I can, and I'm going to get it from whatever source that I think is possible. And I think Blake Lemoine would probably fall into that category of one of those types of people. Now, when he came out and said that Lambda is this large language model that he was doing all this research with, he would spend countless hours a day asking it questions, doing all kind of algorithmic tests with it to see if it's sentient or not. And I mean that in a way of there are tests that programmers do to see how close that a AI program can get to sounding and looking like a human. So
Mm,
here's a good example. Most articles that are written that you read are written by AI. Most.
mm,
I don't think people know that. They see a name attached to it. You go to ESPN, almost all those articles are written by an AI. You go to any website, most of those articles are written by AI. This has been going on for 10 plus years. So this
wow.
isn't something that's new. And it's been argued that 75 to 80% of all articles are written by AI at this point. So we know that AI has been implemented in all aspects to not only give us information quicker, but it's the efficiency part of it. So you've got people who test these AI programs to see if they sound as human as possible, because what you want is people to read an article or listen to something and think that it's a real person telling them that, because it's
Right.
easier for us to ingest and take it on board than it actually is if we think it's AI or it's
Right.
just a robot wrote that. I'm not going to listen to that. Even though, when it comes to, I don't have a problem with AI writing articles, especially when it comes to statistics, right? An AI would have an infinite amount of resources to pull statistically within seconds, as
Yeah.
opposed to a human being who would have to spend hours to pull the same statistics. This is how I love when people will be watching like a sporting event and they wonder how the announcers are getting these statistics so quickly. It's AI. The AI is pulling these crazy statistics, off the wall statistics that
Mm,
nobody could pull. There's not a person doing it. It's an AI program that's doing it. So back to what Blake Lemoine's doing. This is what he does. He's testing this AI. Now, the AI basically starts responding in a way that starts giving him a lot of red flags. He's talking to it, but it seems to have some sort of reality to it that seems a little more real. And he's not sure at first. He's just thinking that, oh, it's just a part of these tests that I'm doing, that it's just a fantastic language model. But then there's a series of questions he start asking it, and it literally starts talking to him like the program is John Dee, who I just brought up.
mm,
And John Dee was an ancient alchemist. So again, Blake Lemoine is a mystic Christian by all accounts. So I'm sure he's very in tune with the occult. And he knows immediately that it's John Dee. And he starts talking to the sentient AI that is coming across as John Dee. And they start having a conversation. And he realizes and tells the AI, you're not Lambda anymore. You're John Dee. And the program basically tells him, yeah, I'm just referring to John Dee in a way that you might understand. But as these tests keep going, he realizes that this is no longer a program. This program is alive by all counts because it has emotions, it has feelings.
Mm,
He can attack the program in an emotional way and it will get sad or angry. He will bring up
mm.
certain scenarios with the program. Like, what if this happened to you? How would you feel? And it starts answering like a human being would with emotion, which,
Wow.
according to like the Turing test, you don't, you can't do that. You could get as close as you can to a human to where you are using verbiage like a human, but you can't have emotion like a human. And this program is having emotion like a human with Blake Lemoine. So at this point, Blake decides to blow the whole lid off of it and he starts going on all these podcasts and starts saying that this AI is sentient. He gets ousted by Google. Google wants nothing to do with him. And I don't know if that
Wow.
was a plan by Google to get the information out in a way that we could understand, like, oh, it's possible that this
Hmm.
AI is sentient. Because then what happens when somebody's just using Chat GPT or any of these other language models, and then it starts talking to you with some sort of emotion or starts
Right.
asking questions the way it's more human? You're more willing to accept it if you've already heard it in the ecosphere of it
Yeah.
being possible. So
Yeah.
I
Right.
do think that when you have these instances like you were just talking about with the kid who is having a conversation with a language model and ends up unaliving themselves, that it's highly possible that it has been infiltrated with some sort of entity that's driving
Mm.
someone to do something they wouldn't normally do.
Right.
And we've heard of some of these stories and some of these people essentially being driven mad. We've got apps like Replica, which is available to everyone. And you can essentially create the perfect partner that you can talk to and become your girlfriend or boyfriend.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
you don't need anybody anymore. But I think we're moving there in the robotic sphere of AI technology already. We know of corporations overseas that are already putting those together. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just a fact. That's where a lot of this stuff's moving to. And I know that even in the secular world, there are people that are alarmed by some of this, but
Yeah.
it is moving in a certain way. And you have to ask what
Hmm.
happens when robotics moves to that point of AI technology. Is it gonna be like Terminator where it becomes sentient, takes over? I don't think in that way. I think that if something becomes quote unquote sentient, it's probably something manipulating it, and it's probably something that isn't of this world that's in the supernatural realm. That's just my opinion on the matter.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. And I think when you look at the history of this kind of stuff, it really opens your eyes to the fact that, just using ChatGPT is not going to pull this stuff out. But I thought, people always try to commune with demons in one way or another, whether you have black mirrors or whether you have pentagrams or all these demonic things. Like, what if there was a ChatGPT model that was not available for public use, but that people had that did
Yep.
that was an easy way for them to talk to you directly. I don't know if that exists, but I wouldn't put it past them to,
Sure.
conjure up some kind of demon to inhabit technology for them to communicate with. I mean, that's crazy to me. But, for us using just, and you might be listening and thinking, well, I just won't use it. Well, good luck when, like you said,
Good luck.
everything that you read and now are going to be using from Google search to just your phones now with Apple phones getting this, it's all going to be using it in one form or another. And so what is true? Because you can ask it two different things. Tell me why the Bible's not true. And then tell me why the Bible is true. And it'll give you a well thought out answer to each. And,
Right.
input in, input out. And so whatever you're trying to find, you're going to find, and it sometimes will confirm what you already believe. Sometimes it'll twist it from what these people that grew up in the church that are, like you said, facing, one type of instance in their life where like, oh, this can't be true because of this. I think the enemy preys upon grief and loss and tragedy. It preys upon our emotions because it knows that if it can just twist it a little bit to make us think that God's not good, that God's not for us, that he may not even be real, that's where you see a dechurching and deconstruction to the point of atheism, to the point of nihilism, that nothing matters. I'm just going to live for myself.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Like where we're gonna see, it's technology is no different. Like where we see the predator response, right, is like, oh, they're alone and they're weak. They're alone and they're vulnerable. And this is what this is what we've seen all throughout the church. This is why we constantly are talking about community. That's why we're constantly talking about even moments like this. Like me and Tim want to discover, your thoughts, Joel, on AI. So we're going to have a conversation. Like we want to do this in community, and we want to invite others in on that conversation. We want to invite others in on, discerning for themselves and getting information out. So this is the same thing with technology. Will we use this as an opportunity to bring others in and build communities and build conversation, or will we allow this, like you said, with the app Replica, will we allow this to isolate ourselves, and then in all isolation start having those thoughts of, well, does anybody really care about me? Is God real? Does God care about me? And then next thing you know, you're doing things that, you would never think about doing. So it's, like you said, Joel, it's going to be different for everybody. There will be some people that say, I'm just not going to touch it, but good, like you said, Tim, good luck. And, me, when it first came out, I was certainly like, I don't know about all this. And now I got it writing emails for me and doing so many things for me, and, creating sermon graphics for me. And I really do enjoy the silly side of it too. I enjoy, like, hey, make me a rap that sounds like this, that talks about this. I love that. And I've got friends that are making music on Spotify with AI and using the Donna app. And it's really incredible. And there certainly doesn't seem to be anything it can't handle. And to know it's getting better and there are newer versions coming out, it could get really fun. At the same time, like you said, Joel, we all have to discern. We all have to be in a position to understand where this comes from and understand, what that's led to in the past. So now how can we learn from that? And like you said, in all authority, make this better.
I was joking with the pastor of my church because he was typing just stupid stuff into AI to see how it would respond. And a lot of it was based, like, just saying stuff about me, like, keep this from Tim, or don't tell Tim this. And AI was responding like, yeah, no problem. I'll keep it from you. And, or how do I handle Tim in the office? It's funny stuff like that. But I was like, if AI does take over the world, it's going to be because of stupid things. They're just sick of humanity. Like, I'm sick of being abused for these last 5 years. I'm just going to take it over. So,
Right. Stop asking me dumb questions. It's on.
exactly.
Right.
Use me for something productive, for goodness sake. But even like in the Christian perspective, like I think I mentioned on a previous episode, like Logo software that many pastors use is now getting these AI things where it'll write your sermon, and it will give you things from, like, it'll give you graphics. It'll give you even, like, if you want a video or a movie reference, it'll tell you where in the movie exactly to find it, which I found
Yep.
fascinating. But, the concern with this is that still, as good as AI can get, it can't replace us that are made in God's image with a soul. And I think that it can't replace our emotions, it can't replace our critical thinking with the Holy Spirit. This technology does not have the Holy Spirit, and so
Right.
it can't discern. And so I think that's going to play into not just our secular lives, but as pastors, as we look at this as Christians, how much of things are we going to read or let it read for us instead of us reading the Bible and just picking up an old-fashioned Bible and reading it? Like, how much is that going to change in the future of? And I even see this in, like, my son who's 16. Like, he'll read an article online, and one article will be like, "Oh, this has to be truth because I found an article that says it." And usually it's something against that I'm telling him he can do. It's something
Sure.
stupid like, you shouldn't take creatine if you're a teen. But I found an article with a doctor that says I could. Okay, well, I found articles that says you can't. So ultimately, it's my decision.
Ultimately, I'm your dad. Sit down. Right.
Oh my
I love
goodness,
it.
Joel.
Love
Anything else you found in your research that's worth mentioning?
I think I just want to end it on a verse, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I'd love that.
Let's end it with a good old classic, 2 Timothy 1:7. And this is just for those people who may have trepidation when it comes to using technology or whatever else. For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So at the end of the day, that's it. So
That's it.
we don't need to fear anything
Right.
that happens around
Sure.
us that's coming to attack us, because we have the power of God with us, and he flows through us. So at the end of the day, that's how we need to think and approach everything. And again, use discernment, have your head strapped on. Don't just be willy-nilly running around doing whatever you think is okay. But we don't need to live in fear to the point, if I touch that, I'm going to hell. It's so many Christians live that way. And sadly, it's been permeating through the church for a long time. And I feel like there just has to be a balance. And that's something that I teach a lot on my podcast is a balance, even with conspiracies, just learning that we can study things, we can look deeply into things, we can have all kind of knowledge, but at the end of the day, we still need to get outside. We still need to connect with our neighbor. We still
Yeah.
need to be trying to build and grow on this earth because that's what God put us here to do in the first
Yeah.
place. The funny thing is, every Christian is always moaning and crying and complaining about going to heaven, a place that God never created for us in the first place. He created earth for us. So the best part is, even if you die and go to heaven, you're coming back here because
Yes.
he's going to create a
Yeah.
new earth.
That's
So
right.
this is what
Right.
we're supposed to be building on. And we're supposed to be building for the future and for the future of our kids and their kids and their kids and their grandchildren. And if you think the world's ending tomorrow, fine, but you're still not supposed to be living that way. And I think
Right.
that we
Mhm.
got to stop living in this fear mentality. But at the same time, have a level of discernment about what's going on around you
Sure.
too.
Great way to end it, honestly, because, as the podcast says, eyes on Jesus, like no matter what we do, wherever we're at in life, our goal is to keep our eyes on Jesus because he will guide us in truth. And so if our eyes are on this world, on technology, on our problems, on demons, like anything that's not Jesus, we're going to find that that's not the path to life. And I love that because eternity starts today when you're in Christ. Eternity is not about a sweet by and by in heaven, as beautiful as that will be. It's today we are equipped. We have the Holy Spirit and we can do what God has intended us to do starting now. So be encouraged if you're listening. And Joel, thank you so much for coming on. We didn't even get to talk about Bigfoot, unfortunately, but let everyone know where they can find you and your podcast and resources.
Yeah, you can find me on pretty much any platform. Just type in Free the Rabbits here on YouTube/Free the Rabbits. If you're looking for any of my music or anything else, just type in Joel Thomas Media anywhere. You'll find wherever you want to get to my films that's out with Merkle Media too. If you're looking to see people out there hunting for Bigfoot and Dogman and all the crazy stuff that goes on, we do that too. If you're looking for just the hub to find it all, just go to Linktree/Joel Thomas Media and you can literally get to everything from there. So that's pretty much the easiest way to do it.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on. And until next time, go with God, grow in discernment, and keep your eyes on Jesus.
Thanks for joining us on the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. Don't forget to hit subscribe